Holocaust, Genocide, and Interfaith Education Center here at Manhattan College, and I'm also Associate Professor of Religious Studies. I teach in the department. I teach both Holocaust and also Islam. So I really want to welcome you tonight. Thank you for coming out, and I know God was with me because the rain stopped. And it was a beautiful sky, and you could see it break out into sunlight. So I just want to say a few words, and then invite Rick Feldman here to introduce Emmanuel. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the film before the film. And if not, we could just have a conversation, right? I mean, it's always possible. So I just want to say that today the center is marking International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it's actually technically on the 27th of January, and the UN is doing a lot of events on Monday, all day. Unfortunately, I can't be there because some of you know I teach on Mondays. But there are film screenings. There is also an exhibit on the rescue of Jews by Albanian Muslims during World War II. There's some really amazing things. If you're interested in going, you can go, and it's pretty much open to the public. At least the exhibits that the United Nations has. So today it's commemorating the tragedy of the Holocaust that occurred during the Second World War, as you know. It commemorates a genocide that resulted in the death of an estimated 6 million Jewish people, 5 million Slavs, 3 million ethnic Poles, 200,000 Romani people, 250,000 mental and physically disabled people, and 9,000 homosexual men by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. It was designated by the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 6070 on 1st of November 2005 during the 42nd plenary session. The resolution came after a special session was heard earlier that year on the 24th of January 2005, during which the United Nations General Assembly marked the 60th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi concentration camps and the end of the Holocaust. I want to note that on January 27, 1945, Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi concentration and death camp, was liberated by the Red Army. So this is what we're marking and commemorating, and this is a commemoration that happens all over the world. And people do it differently in different ways. And we're here to remember the victims, but sadly I stand before us as there is the rise of anti-Semitism by 68% in the last 2 years in the United States. The Pittsburgh shooting was not so long ago, and recent swastikas, the Star of David drawn on synagogues and streets, is even more urgent for us here today. We must never stand by when racism engulfs our nation or any nation. I was in Poland this last winter to do some research, and I went to Auschwitz, where I walked arm in arm with my 11-year-old daughter. As Muslims, we prayed for the dead, and for my daughter, she was in dismay, to say the least. But having her by my side made it even more difficult for me, as I wondered as a mother, how could I have watched my children be murdered? How could I have let go of my children? How could I have been separated by my own children? A very powerful moment for the two of us as we walk throughout Auschwitz and then Birkenau. As we commemorate this day today, let us remember and educate ourselves that any kind of racism, especially anti-Semitism today, leads to death. Racism leads to violence. Racism leads to borders. May we never be deafened to those who need us today or tomorrow. We just commemorated Martin Luther King's Day, and remember that Martin Luther King said to us very succinctly that violence never begets anything but violence. Borders never begets anything but segregation. This is a man who went through segregation. This is a man who was assassinated, even though he wanted peace and nonviolence. May we learn something from the great prophets of this country today. And I want to thank Manhattan College, which is a Lasallian Catholic college, which I'm really very, very proud of being at this college, and especially a Catholic college, that encourages, allows to educate our students and the community about the Holocaust and genocide. And I want to now thank Emmanuel Rund for coming from Philadelphia. We're so honored and graced to have him. And I would like to invite Rick finally Feldman to come up and give his introduction to Emmanuel Rund.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming out on this dark, cold winter night. Really cold, but it's gray all day, and we're all ready to down for it. So, this is Emmanuel, and he's a storyteller. He's told stories on at least 3 continents, maybe 5. And there's very few people who I can say I know who has spent time with Hannah Arendt.
Arendt.
Arendt, thank you. Elvis Presley, Jimmy Carter, and even Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Those are just 4 of a very, very wide group of people that our guest has interviewed or just casually had lunch with. You know, very, very, very well traveled amongst people of very high station, but also very comfortable with just the folks around us. The best storytellers are able to, connect everybody where they're at. And I think we're in the presence of one of the best. He was raised in Israel. Went into the army, where he was an intelligence officer. He started in radio as a teen. And then he was picked up when the Israeli television began in 1967. He was picked up.
68.
68? 68.
I was picked up 67, we started 68. Yeah, gotcha.
So he was trained by in the nascent beginning of the Israeli television, and worked on many stories there. He came to America, he worked in the TV industry in New York. He went to South Carolina and Tennessee, where he made industrials for medical field.
Well, documentary films to improve bedside manner in the country. 50 films.
Compassion in the medical world. He was in Germany for 30 years on and off. In Germany, he was a rabbi and a gabbai and a cantor, everything but a shochet, I think, right?
Or more help.
And he made over 30 films in those years.
About the Holocaust.
About the Holocaust. He's made over 200 films overall. But about the Holocaust, when Landesman was making a huge film on the Holocaust in the early 80s,
right. 85.
Emmanuel was making small gems of films about people very connected. Where many people have huge, when you see the credits of films, they go on and on. This is your filmmaker with a sound man doing very close work. So it's a very big contrast, the big stories and the little ones. What makes him particularly relevant to today is in 1996, Emmanuel petitioned the German government to start a day to honor the Holocaust. And they did. And since that time, in Germany, January 27th, the day of the liberation of Auschwitz has become a national day of thought, and really serious thought, in the schools and throughout in the parliament. I think youngsters are invited to the parliament, and there's a large discussion about how this affects the German people and the world that we live in. It was picked up throughout Europe, and in 2005, it was adopted into the United Nations as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So, we're here at the source with a storyteller who has gone out, who has really carried the banner for not only the Jewish people, but for all people. And welcoming him so much is so pleasant, and I'm so honored that he's in our neighborhood. So hopefully we'll get to see the film, but Emmanuel.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. He did everything. We asked you a lot. And so, first of all, Dr. Friedi, thank you very much for the invitation and for the center here, the Manhattan College. First of all, for running such an institute, which is great for humanity altogether, and yeah, and for running it and for inviting me. Now, I hope we have to pray, and then the film will play. We have also to love the film and the equipment, and yeah, with God's will, you know, it will work. Elu derechei Hashem, that's the ways that things go. And now, since we didn't see the film, I'll tell a little bit about making it, the film All Jews Out. I worked in this country making many films on social justice, human rights, equal rights, minorities. I used to take part in meetings of groups of Jewish groups together with Afro-American black groups. We did it in Nashville, Tennessee at Fisk University. And I've done lots of films. We heard about 50 films to improve bedside manner in the country for all medical students around the country, and many other things. Political campaign, I shot political campaign under Jimmy Carter for president, 76, for Jim Sesser, that I made him a senator on the Hill, Senator of Tennessee. At some point I worked with about 20 different TV stations, American and international, and at some point friends in Hollywood asked me to go and help them making feature films. And after a while, one day after praying in the morning, I meditated and decided that I did come to this world for more meaningful reasons and not to entertain the world. So I'm the only Meshuggah who left Hollywood. Beautiful life, you cannot imagine. Really. And good life and good money and everything. I left everything to go to New York, Upper West Side mainly, and help survivors, liberate them, because they kept their personal story, they didn't tell anybody. And I decided, I knew how much pressure it is for them and their families and other people, so I decided to help them, and I started one-on-one to help them. And then I took them Sunday afternoons to Hunter College. I used to be professor for film at NYU, Columbia School of Visual Arts, so I was granted a room at Hunter College to be able to bring survivors, and I brought them together, and what I wanted happened with God's help, that they started to talk to each other, and I started to hear Auschwitz, Theresienstadt, and all the camps, and I realized they start to open up, at least with their own comrades. And then I decided that by that time I made about 150 films in my life, that I'll commit myself just to make films about the Holocaust with all survivors. So I worked on 2 films with Elie Wiesel, Professor Elie Wiesel. We took him to Spanish Harlem and to meet kids, high school kids, 13-year-old, who have really tough life, as we know. And they asked him beautiful, I would say, great questions, and he knew exactly how to answer these 13-year-olds. And so we did that. And then we were filming at home by Professor Wiesel. And then that was 1980. And I continued to help the Holocaust survivors. At some point, we created the one and only biggest meeting of Holocaust survivors, together with Rebbitzin and Professor Yafa Eliach from Brooklyn College, and Professor Brahms, who died a month ago at City College, and other people. We organized a meeting in Washington, D.C. for 35,000 survivors, sitting together in a stadium over there, in a sports arena. And that was really the liberation for them. Sitting together with other survivors gave them the koyach, the craft, the power to overcome their story and open up and live more normal life, let's say. And I worked also with the second generation already from 1972, as Helen Epstein, neighbor of mine of the Upper West Side, wrote the first book about the second generation, so I got with them into it. Yeah, and then as I worked with survivors, I decided at some point I would like to take survivors to Europe, where they came from. So I brought a family from Queens to Germany, near Stuttgart, where they grew up. And then we filmed in concentration camp Theresienstadt, Terezin, north of Prague in Czechoslovakia, where the family were 3 years, parents and daughter, and survived it with luck. So I took them to this concentration camp, and I filmed simultaneously 3 films together. One was a long documentary film that I hope we'll be able to see, All Jews Out, and 2 other films. Besides commemorating the Holocaust, I wanted all of my work that I've done was always with an eye about what's going on today in the world. Racism, anti-Semitism, bigotry, genocides, and I decided to do whatever I could do to try to stop it, whatever I could do. And one of the films, I took this survivor. She was about 60-year-old at the time, 65. And I took a girl, Frederica, a 13-year-old German girl, together to concentration camp, where this survivor told her story to the young woman, who could have been the survivor back then as a child in their own village or town. And yeah, so I made those films, and the idea was to show through that film, especially the 2 women film, which I wanted to make also 2 women film, was about bullying, against bullying. The story of this survivor at the age of 4, she used to play with her Christian friends, and together with their dolls and everything, and overnight, some of them became her worst enemy. Started to beat her up and spit on her or whatever. And so with that film, I made it for ages 8 and up. Doesn't have the horror of the concentration camp. It has more mainly the situation in that small town, how this woman was bullied at the time and persecuted, and yeah. So I made those films, and the film, I shot it 1988, those 3 films, and in 1990 the film was invited by the Motion Picture Academy for the Oscar competition in 1990. And the film played then all over the world, and yeah, and then I continued to make films. I made altogether 30 films about the Holocaust. And now as I went to Germany, I made the films also. I realized I used to travel a lot and lecture. I was about 200 times on lecture tours in Germany, screening my films and talking in high schools, universities, church communities, whatever. And I found out sometimes young Germans used to come to me after the screening, and they would tell me how much they suffer because of what the grandparents did, the Nazis. And I realized that there must be millions of young Germans who suffer because of what their grandfather usually or grandparents did. And I decided I would like to help them out. Again, to liberate them from the pressure, psychological pressure they had. And so I thought the best healing process will be to meet Jews. Now in Germany it's very hard to meet Jews. The Jews are in the bunker. They're afraid of what's going on, neo-Nazis or other groups and terror and everything. And they're not interested in young Germans per se. But I was, because I wanted to help them. And I also wanted to connect them to Israel and to the Jewish people, so both sides. So I organized a group of young Germans. I took them to Israel to meet Jews from their hometown. So they had a common denominator. They went to the same high school, gymnasium. The Jews in the 20s, 30s, and they lately at that time. And yeah, and I met them, and I hugged them, and I met their families, and I introduced them to the children, the second generation. I introduced them to the third generation, their age, about 20 years old or 17. And yeah, and I made 5 films in Israel with those young Germans. And I didn't want to put any issue of Holocaust. I just wanted to have really a friendly meeting of young Germans and Jews over there. And but one day they came to me and said, Emmanuel, we know that tomorrow, it was 1994 in Jerusalem, tomorrow you Jews have the Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day in Yad Vashem, and could you arrange that we will be able to go there? So I talked to my friend over there and said, thank you very much. I didn't want to put it on them, but since it comes from them, sure, hallelujah. So I took them over there, and I knew how hard it was for them to see all the survivors and the ceremony. And I was filming them, and my mother, who lived in Jerusalem, escorted them speaking German, so they wouldn't be alone. After about 2 hours of the ceremony, and I was still filming, camera on the shoulders, running around, filming survivors, filming whoever was from the Israeli government over there. And then at the end they came to me, and one of them, one of the young women, kind of ran to me like a bull, running like into me. I thought I'll have to walk away, that she doesn't hurt me. And I couldn't understand, like she's like a bull, kind of full energy, running like towards me. And then I just stuck the camera and the microphone to her, and I said, Karen, would you like to say something? And she said, und wie, and how? I'm ashamed as a German woman that in my country, where we are responsible for all what happened, we don't remember the Holocaust and the survivor and the victims and survivors the way you, the Jews, do. So with that information, once I finished filming in Israel those 5 films, I went back to Germany, where I stayed for many years and served as a filmmaker, but I served also as a rabbi cantor in about 15 communities. And since then, therefore, I was also on the board of the Christian-Jewish Relations Board in Germany, and partially in Europe. And I used to do it also in the United States with Rabbi Mark Tenenbaum. But over there, since I was on the board of that organization, I had the privilege or the chances, sometimes 3 times a week, to go to events where the top German leadership was, from Angela Merkel, the chancellor, to the presidents, to top bishops in Germany, and top educators. And and I came to them and I told them, listen, I was filming in Israel with young people from your country here in Germany, and they're ashamed. I was a little chutzpahdik. I was like pointing a finger at them with kind of anger, but and I said, the young Germans are ashamed that you Germans don't have a Memorial Day to remember the victims of the Nazis. I generalized all the victims, not only the Jews, that they should have a Memorial Day to remember the Jews and the Gypsies and the Christian people and the homosexuals and whoever was their victims of the Nazis. And so from middle of 1994, around Shavuos, until the end of 95, a year and a half, I met about 250 people who asked, please help me set up a day like this. And then they started to build a pyramid all the way to the decision makers, the chancellor and presidents, and the government, the parliament. And sure enough, on the 3rd of January 1996, I get a call from the office of the president of Germany, Mr. Herzog, and that the president adopted my initiative and is proclaiming the 27th of January as a Memorial Day to the victims of the Nazis. And I said, hallelujah. Thank you. And then I was invited every year to the German parliament in Berlin as a guest of honor for the one who started it, and meeting all the heads of the Jewish community, all the Christian communities, Muslim community, many were invited, and many survivors and many rabbis. And yeah, and we did that. Meanwhile, my day was adopted by European countries, all of Europe, and then the United States Secretary General Kofi Annan, Mr. Kofi Annan from Ghana, he proclaimed my day for the whole world as the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, 27th of January. And maybe I'll see some of you. I was invited again by the UN to be there Monday for the event. And yeah, so that's part of it. And part of my life, which is, I grew up already as a child. My mother put me on a track of what we call in Hebrew tikkun olam, to improve the world, repair the world, whatever one can do to help the people around him, in his neighborhood, in his city, in the country, in the world, as far as they can go. And I'm glad that with the films I was able to reach really the whole world with my films, being on television usually or wherever, in many, many countries. Yeah, then I made a film about the use of arts for human rights and understanding and peace. It was played in 53 countries, so, you know, a couple of billion potential viewers. And yeah, I continued to do it, and I continue to make films. And yeah, I have a few films that I'm working on now. One of them is about to give credit to the mainly Catholic Poles who saved Jews during the war in Poland and took a risk of getting killed by the Nazis, and many were killed in their whole families, the Jews and the Christians. And so I thought I would like to give those people credit, and also to show the world, youngsters today, be there for the underprivileged or the one who is persecuted or whatever. And so I always work on what can we learn from the past in order to create a better, friendly world. Maybe I'll stop right here, and maybe if anybody has questions specifically. Okay.
When and where were you ordained as a rabbi, and how on earth did you have the time to study for it?
Yeah, time is something, I don't know what time is. I just do it, you know. And I studied with best rabbis in Jerusalem, Rabbi Schlesinger, Rabbi Hexter, Rabbi Levin, many other rabbis. And then I studied again further in New York. And when I came to Germany, I didn't want to serve as a rabbi cantor. I just want to make a film, get out of there, because it's not nice for a Jew to be in Germany, let's put it this way. And I suffered a lot. But then the Jewish community of Germany asked me, please we need you also to serve the Jews in Germany, and especially the Russian Jews who flocked to Germany in around 1990. And so I was serving them in about 15 communities. So I worked time. I didn't have time because I worked 24/7, 365 days a year. Monday I'll start working on the film until Friday, then I'll take the train, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours to my congregation, sometimes all the way up there, away. Come Friday afternoon, without a breath. I didn't have a chance to rest from the week that I was working. On Sabbath you're supposed to rest. And here I come without a breath and supposed to start singing. But he was always on my side and pumped me the energy, and I was able to do it. And for me it was also beautiful to be in my congregation with my congregants for the whole Sabbath, for the whole weekend. And then I would leave on Sunday, take the train back to my home, and Monday go again and make the films. And again, for me it was beautiful to be with my congregants because I suffered lots of anti-Semitism in Germany, especially somebody who was on the front as a Jew. Everybody in Germany knew me. Some of them saw my films. They saw the interviews with me on television, on newspapers, radio, so they knew who I am. And I would get letters with swastikas, yeah, dirty Jew, get out of our country, we'll get you, we'll kill you. Don't tell our children or grandchildren about Holocaust, that never happened, and all of that. So I had to be very careful over there. But I lived in a building that there were 3 exits. So every time I got out through a different exit, just in case they're waiting for me. And when I left the building, of course, I looked to the right and to the left. Now, and then I talk to every person. Wherever I see somebody in time, no time, if there are 2 minutes, I talk to somebody waiting for the bus. So in the train, I don't waste the time. And from talks and from other activities, I came across old Nazis in Germany. So I became a Nazi hunter. I located some of the Nazis, one SS man who served in concentration camp Bergen-Belsen, another woman who was in Theresienstadt, Theresin, and she was the mistress of Adolf Eichmann, because, as she said, after she was a little drunk, that she saw that it was very hard for Adolf Eichmann to deport the Jews to Auschwitz, and he had to deport 4,000, 10,000 Jews, and write all the names and make sure that the trains leave at the time where the orphans are ready to receive them. And so for me, I couldn't hear anymore once she said all those things. But she was willing to appear in my film, this one, All Jews Out. And that's one of the reasons why the film was so strong, that the Nazi woman tells in the film how terrible it was for the Jews in the camp, just even without having enough to eat and without running water and sanitation, and needless, you know, the terror that will be shipped the next day to Auschwitz. So I came across some Nazis. As a young man, I was at the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, and that's where I met Hannah Arendt.
What do you think of her interpretation, the banality of evil?
I think that she had identity crisis.
Exactly.
Living with a Nazi, Heidegger, and she had to give the excuse for coming, so to say, against the Jewish notion and all of that. At that time when I met her, I was 16, I didn't know anything, but later on I knew what it was. And yeah, so I saw Eichmann, you know, and in the glass booth at the trial in Jerusalem. And then again, I met his mistress, who appeared in my film, telling how terrible it was. And yeah, and then I continued to build bridges between Germans and Jews, German and 3 generations Israelis. I studied psychology, I had time for that too. and I help people, marital problems, anything, and worked in a department of psychiatry and all of that. I had time for that, made my life out of it, living out of it. And, yeah, so it was always kind of,
I'd like to hear your story.
say it again?
I'd like to hear your family story.
Okay,
Because you were born in Israel.
Right.
And that must be a good story.
okay. We come from Toledo, Spain. 1492, we left Toledo, Spain, with Rabbi Yitzhak Abarbanel, Rabbi Isaac Abarbanel, chief rabbi of Toledo. We came to Venice, Venezia, and lived in the ghetto over there. My forefathers,
I
forebears.
think we have the film.
Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Thank you. And thank you, guys. Good.
You gotta finish the story though, then we,
Yeah, okay.
Well, how about later?
Right.
We're waiting an hour.
All right.
Everyone see it?
Good.
you know, some folks, I'm thankful that Emmanuel doesn't have to speak so much, but we were very thankful that he could speak so much. Thank you, Emmanuel.
You're welcome.
Eisenbahnlinie zwischen Stuttgart und Ulm. Das ist dort eine bedeutende jüdische Gemeinde. Was weiß die Nachwuchsgeneration
Can you
davon?
fix it so that we can read the
Was
subtitles?
wissen ihre Kinder?
Can everyone be
Wissen Sie, dass die Juden am Aufbau der Göppinger Industrie beteiligt waren? Was ist geblieben?